I'm so excited to have you, Dr. Bradley Nelson, back on the show. Your books have meant a lot to me, and I still reference the emotion code quite a bit in just conversations with my friends. So I'm really excited that you're moving on to the heart code because my theme in the last few years with my personal development has been what I call heart purification. And so we'll get into that, but I feel like I'm going to learn so much just from this new exploration. And so let's just dive into it since I've had you on the show before, but how do you define a heart wall and what real world behaviors signal that it might be active?
Well, first of all, Melissa, thank you so much for having me on your show. It's really great to be back. And to answer your question, first of all, I believe that the heart wall is probably the most important thing that people can know about and do for themselves, getting rid of it, in other words, because it can have such a wide ranging effect on their physical and mental and emotional health. So, first of all, what is a heart wall? Well, have you ever had a time in your life where you felt like your heart was going to break?
Oh, yeah. I've even experienced during a breath work what I think was a heart opening.
Okay. So, yeah, most people have had an experience like that. The one where their heart was breaking, not so much the other one. But what happens to us sometimes is that we are really being hurt. We're deep in grief. We're being abused, or we're going through some kind of a breakup or something intense. And we feel that physical sensation, like there's an elephant sitting on our chest, or like we can't breathe, right? Sometimes it might feel like we're choking. And what we now know is that the heart is actually a second brain. It has its own brain. Now, they've known for a long time that the heart had gray matter and white matter in it, but it wasn't until 1991 that they really began to put it together, that this is a separate nervous system from the brain that is in our heads. And it is the nervous system, the brain, if you will, that has the memories of the things we really love, and that has the affinities of the things that we really care about the most. And, you know, it didn't take too long after they began doing heart transplants back in the 1960s that doctors began noticing this weird phenomenon where people would have a heart transplant and they would come back to the doctor and they would report weird things, that their taste in music or food or sports had often totally changed, or that they would sometimes have memories of being in places that they never in their life had ever visited. And when these people were connected with the families of the heart donors, they would inevitably find out things like, well, yeah, our son was a baseball player and now you love baseball. And gee, that's interesting. And his heart is now beating inside of you. Or, gee, our daughter loved Rome and visited it every chance she got. It was her favorite city in the world. And now you have memories of being in Rome and you say you've never in your life ever visited there. That's really weird. So those must be her memories. So, of course, this is called cellular memory. And there are whole books written about this, right? But what happens to us is that when we feel like our heart is going to break, the subconscious mind will put up a wall around that heart. And that wall is made of layers of your emotional baggage. And that emotional baggage we call trapped emotions. And we develop trapped emotions from emotional experiences where we have an emotion coming up and we don't want to feel it, so we bury it, right? You've never done that, have you, Melissa?
Yeah, for a good couple of decades. And that's what this work is all about.
Right. Have you ever had a situation where an emotion was coming up and you decided that not only were you going to feel it a little bit, you were going to really enhance it and and get really upset? Of course, we've all done that, right? I've done it. Um, and sometimes things happen to us that are just emotionally overwhelming, right? Someone dies, or suddenly we're in a breakup and we didn't expect it, or sometimes things happen that are just overwhelmingly powerful. Any of those circumstances can create trapped emotions. There are two other ways we get trapped emotions. One way is when someone close to us is feeling an intense emotion and we absorb that emotion, and that becomes a trapped emotional energy in our body. And the other way is that sometimes we inherit emotional energy at conception from mom or dad that they might have inherited. And these can go back from, sometimes for many generations. But when you have a heart wall, what it will do is it will interfere with your ability to give and receive love. So it won't be as easy for you to connect with other people. It won't be as easy for you to feel positive emotions. It won't be as easy for you to really find your soulmate or to achieve your true purpose in this world, because that blueprint, I believe, for the perfect life you can live is really locked up inside of your heart. And that's why intuitively we say things to people like, you should follow your heart, you know. And that's true. It's great advice. But what if you've got a heart wall? And most people do. 90% of people do.
Yeah, that is part of what I've been understanding through heart purification. I've even been speaking about it recently when people say trust your gut. And I'm like, if you don't know how to actually tune into your gut and you think all of your past experiences, the beliefs you've accumulated, your fears that you're holding on to, if you think that is your gut because that's the loudest voice right now, then you don't have the ability to follow your gut. So how are you going to follow your heart if you don't actually even know how to tune into that area in your body?
Yeah, that's a fantastic point, because all of that emotional baggage that you have, that you've accumulated during your life, but also the emotional baggage you received at conception or that you brought into this world with you, that you had prior to conception, uh, deflects your life, and it can detour you, and it gradually, slowly begins to alter your personality into somebody that you weren't really intended to be. And that's one of the most beautiful things really about the emotion code, is that it's so easy to begin stripping away all of this baggage so that we gradually realize that we're turning back into this other person that is a more pure version of ourselves, the person that we were really intended to be. And that's one of the exciting things. Now, you asked earlier how you can maybe tell if you might have a heart wall. Well, we think that about 93% of people have a heart wall. Uh, a lot of the people that don't have one are children that have not been through the kind of difficult experiences that they will yet face. And so if you're having a hard time finding your soulmate, you probably have a heart wall because it makes it more difficult. If you've been through a divorce, I've never met anyone that had been through a divorce that hadn't developed a heart wall. It just seems to be 100% so far for me. I've been doing this for 37 years now, so I think that's a pretty fair bet. Um, if you if you can remember a time in your life when you felt like your heart was going to break, of course, if you used to cry yourself to sleep at night, um, if your parents went through a divorce, you probably have a heart wall. It's it's the norm really is to have a heart wall. There are some physical things that can happen when you have a heart wall. Uh, it can lead to chronic neck pain, chronic shoulder tightness, trapezius tightness, sometimes discomfort in the upper back is common, even chest discomfort. Um, and of course, we now know that people die sometimes from a broken heart. The Japanese discovered that. They found that sometimes women, especially over the age of 55, who were experiencing some kind of really difficult emotional episode would often go into this peculiar kind of heart failure where on x-ray their heart would assume this almost the exact shape of a Japanese fisherman's jar called a takatsubo. And what's happening is the left ventricle is really ballooning, it's failing, and they called it takatsubo syndrome. Uh, in the US, eventually, I think probably with a certain amount of chagrin, doctors realized, okay, this is a real thing. They call it cardiac syndrome here in the US. And it literally means that you are dying of a broken heart. Um, in fact, one of the famous stories I think about this was Doug Flutie, who was a famous football player. I think back in the '80s, he played for Boston. He lost his father. He died think of a heart attack. He was in the hospital with his mother, and about an hour after his father had passed away, they were in the hospital room with him, and his mother leaned over to kiss her husband goodbye, give him a kiss on the forehead, and all of a sudden she slumped over and was gone. And so this kind of thing is very real. If you feel like you're having a heart attack, by all means, call 911. But if they come back and tell you that your heart enzymes were all normal and it wasn't really a heart attack, you may be on your way to dying of a broken heart. And what we believe is that emotional baggage, and especially the heart wall, is a factor in this. We haven't been able to prove that yet, but we think in time we'll be able to. So in other words, the emotional baggage from the things that you've experienced in your life are having a physical effect on your heart. The body itself is just energy, and emotions are energy as well. So some of the other things that you might notice, one of the big side effects of having a heart wall is depression. In fact, the worst cases of depression that we have seen now in almost 4 decades always have had a heart wall. And in fact, there have been many times when removing a heart wall from someone, releasing that, clearing that completely, has resulted in people who were suicidally depressed, completely turning around in a matter of days. It's a really powerful thing. In fact, when I was in practice, during the last 10 years that I was in practice, Melissa, most of the people that I saw had been told there was really no hope for them at all in Western medicine. And that what they had was incurable, which just meant that what they had couldn't be cured with drugs or surgery, right? So these people would come to me sometimes, and I would do an initial examination on these people. I would test the balance of all the organs and glands and chakras and meridians. And it wasn't unusual to find all the organs and glands imbalanced in these people and lots of the chakras and meridians. And sometimes I would just do one thing with these people. And that one thing was to clear the emotional energies that were wrapped around their hearts, to clear their heart wall. And then I would retest these people, re-examine them, inevitably to find that 80% of all those organs and glands were all balanced again, and the chakras and meridians. It was the single most powerful thing that I could do to affect someone's health. So it's very important.
Mm. Yeah, I mentioned how I felt like I had a heart opening, and it was the first time I had a physical sensation that really made me lean toward the understanding of the heart, which was just such a blessing. I don't think it broke through everything all at once, but things started shifting for me right after that. And it led me down the path of that was like 10 years ago almost. And now, like I said, still one of my prime focuses is heart purification, really purifying the channel of my own wisdom so that I can follow it without having all of the murkiness of my inherited beliefs or past experiences get in the way. And so I'm curious because I know you've mentioned the heart wall in the emotion code. How has it evolved since you first introduced it in 2007? Or when you look at the emotion code and the body code, where does the heart code fit in that progression?
Well, great question. You know, let me answer that, but first let me just say how interesting it is that all the ancient civilizations believed that the heart was the source of of love and creativity and romance, and they believed that the heart was really the core of our being. And they had different words for the heart, and different viewpoints about it, but it was all pretty much in line. And I think that the ancient peoples got to those conclusions because they observed the kinds of things that we observe today, because human beings are the same now as they were then. And I think they noticed that when you feel like you're really being hurt or you're deep in grief, it's a physical sensation in the chest, it's in the heart. You don't get a headache, you get a heartache, right? But by the same token, I'm sure that they observed that if they were listening to someone singing, for example, that was singing beyond their own ability to a point where their heart was really resonating, they were really singing from their heart, um, they felt it in their heart. And this happens to us today. If we're at some kind of a performance, for example, and we're listening to someone and it's really moving us, you look around and you'll see people with their hands over their heart and tears in their eyes. And so I think that that's where those ancient understandings came from. But when the Emotion Code book was first published, there was one chapter in the book, and that was back in 2007. And that chapter was called The Walls Around Our Hearts. And it was about the heart wall. And when we published, and when I say we, I mean my wife and I, when we published the Emotion Code book, we knew that eventually we would need to write another book just about the heart wall and just about how important it is, because it is so significant. And we talk about the heart wall in the Emotion Code, and we talk about it also in the Body Code book, but we've written this new book to really bring the heart code to the forefront once again and to shine a really bright light on this phenomenon, because we have seen since the Emotion Code book came out, we've seen so many interesting things happen in so many cases. The hardest thing about writing the Heart Code book, honestly, was going through 10,000 testimonials from people from all over the world that have been submitted about this topic, to try to whittle it down to the best ones that were most appropriate for the book. And so we have 5 chapters in the middle of the Heart Code book about the heart wall and animals and success stories and love stories and stories of freedom and renewal and stories about abundance. And it's just the most amazing thing. And some of stories are still coming in all the time. In fact, a really interesting one, kind of funny, came in just about a month ago from one of our practitioners. She said that she was working on an elderly woman who lived in a nursing home. She was in her 80s and had never really been in a long-term relationship or anything. She was kind of a spinster. And she worked on her and cleared her heart wall. And within a week, she reported back that she had fallen in love, really for the first time in her life, with this elderly man who was also a resident down the hall.
Yes. Please air this on reality TV.
Yeah, right. Isn't that funny? There's no limit, really, to there's no age limit to love, and so many fun stories. One of our practitioners told us that she got a call from her sister one day. Now, her sister had been divorced for about 9 years, and she had never let her Emotion Code practitioner sister work on her. But one day, after about 9 years, she called her up and she said, "Listen, will you come and check me and see if I have a heart wall? Because I'm tired of being alone. It's been 9 years and I'm not getting any younger, and I just don't want to be alone the rest of my life. So please come and help me." So she did. The two of them spent the weekend together, and sure enough, the sister had a heart wall, and so she was able to clear her sister's heart wall. And then the amazing thing is that on Monday, the phone started to ring. And who was calling, do you suppose? Well, it was these guys that had known her from years before. And suddenly that wall is no longer there. And so that pure essence of who she is and what her real desires are now free to radiate out into the world. And so all of a sudden, these guys that are maybe miles away or on the other side of the country, all of a sudden she pops into their head. That's how this works. It's really an amazing thing, and it's all explained perfectly well by quantum physics. Now we understand how it all works. Before, it just seemed like woo-woo and crazy stuff, but it actually makes perfect sense now.
No, I love stories like that. And yes, I do think reality TV needs an overhaul, and I would love to see those people on my screen. But I know that so often, and we've probably covered this before, but just for those who haven't heard of this concept, it's just most of these things that happen in our bodies that are causing great detriment start as a way to protect ourselves. So do we find that there are short-term benefits that a heart wall provides, even if there's a long-term cost?
Well, sure, absolutely. I mean, you know, if you're in an abusive relationship, for example, you may put up a wall to protect yourself. A really interesting case that I saw was a woman who had been she had been in an abusive relationship. Her husband was really kind of mentally abusive. It wasn't physical, but it was mental and verbal to a degree, which in some ways may be even worse. And none of her family could figure out why she stayed. But she had children, and she stayed, and for a long time. And then finally, she got her heart wall removed, and within 2 weeks, suddenly, her family was shocked because she had filed for divorce. And they wondered why she hadn't filed for a divorce sooner. Well, what happened was, you see, when you have a heart wall, remember that you feel with your heart. You don't feel with the brain that's in your head. And so it wasn't until that wall was taken down that she was all of a sudden able to really feel how much venom there was in her relationship, uh, how really abused she was being. Having that wall there helped her to be able to endure it all and numbed her in a way to what was really going on. So there can definitely be short-term benefits to having a heart wall. It's kind of like moving your heart into a bunker when the bombs are falling to protect your heart. I mean, it's a protective mechanism. It's a fascinating, I think, one of the most fascinating protective mechanisms in nature, because it happens not only in human beings, but it also happens in animals. Um, More commonly in human beings than animals, but it does happen with animals as well. And so there's a chapter in the Heart Code book about animals, but but it is a protective thing, um, that we end up in the long term paying a pretty heavy price for, really. And it seems that once the subconscious mind has put up this wall, it needs to be taken down, um, with the emotion code, or in possibly in some other way. There are other ways to release trapped emotions, right? The heart wall method that we outline in the Heart Code book, and in the emotion code and the body code, I think is probably the fastest and easiest way to do it. Um, there are probably lots of different ways to do it, but this is probably the most direct.
Hmm. What does it say about me that I actually felt my heart break a little bit when you talked about the animals having a heart wall, and I did not have that kind of visceral reaction with humans. But I'm curious, what which trapped emotions most commonly form heart walls?
Well, you know, it really runs the gamut. You see, when the subconscious mind feels that the heart is in danger, remember, the ancients believed that the heart was the seat of the soul. I really do believe they were right. I think that the heart is really the seat of the subconscious mind. And so when the heart is in danger, the subconscious will begin to build up a wall to try to protect itself. And so a lot of the time, those emotions may already be existing in the body in some other area. A trapped emotion is a little ball of energy, you know, about the size of a baseball typically. And so, for example, um, we have seen cases where a child may only have one trapped emotion making up their heart wall. Um, and that emotion may be inherited because it may be the only trapped emotion that they have, something that they were conceived with that was passed from mom or dad to them that may go back for generations of time. So that's what we see. And so the heart wall, uh, initially we thought that the heart wall was made of emotions, just emotions like heartache and heartbreak and so on. But we pretty quickly realized, no, that it kind of runs the gamut. You can find all kinds of different emotions in the heart wall. And it's really interesting the kinds of things that happen. You know, there's always a subconscious uh, symbolic material chosen. Uh, in my wife's case, it was hardwood, that there was a wall, really a wooden floor essentially that was surrounding her heart. Um, our son, we have we have 8 kids, my wife and I, and our second oldest son had a problem when he was young. He was, I think, 4 years old. And no matter what we would ask him to do, he would say, I can't. And we would say, you can do this. And he would say, I can't. We tested him and we found he had a heart wall. There was it was a sheet of paper. And through muscle testing, we determined this, that he had a heart wall, and that also it was what the material was. That we teach how to do this in the Heart Code book, how you can figure out what the material is. And it probably sounds kind of strange, but to the subconscious mind, it all makes perfect sense, because to the subconscious, everything has to make sense, and you can't have a wall made out of nothing. So it will always choose some kind of symbolic material. It could be anything. In his case, it was a single sheet of paper, and on the paper were written the words, I can't. And when we cleared that, immediately he stopped saying this. So it's kind of funny. I never in my wildest dreams would have imagined that this is real and that this goes on with human beings and animals too, but it does.
Is there a way for a listener to tell if an emotion is theirs or absorbed or inherited or prenatal?
Well, absolutely. That's part of what we teach people how to do, is determine that, because that's one of the things that the subconscious mind typically will want you to know, right? In other words, if you let's say that you absorbed a trapped emotion from your mother, maybe your mom was feeling an emotion of betrayal in the womb. Maybe you're in the third trimester, and you're feeling that emotion too, because everything is energy and emotions are vibration and frequency, and you're feeling that emotion. You may have that emotion now, and it might be causing physical pain for you. In fact, I just saw this I think yesterday, where a woman had an emotion. She had long-term pain in the spine for many years, in the neck and back, and disappeared once we found the actual cause of it, which was this exact thing. It was in the third trimester. The emotion was betrayal. It was her mother's emotion. So when people learn how to do the emotion code process, it's actually very, very fast. Once you learn how to do it, you can identify and release a trapped emotion, usually in a minute, 2 at the most. And so in the process, you're getting information from the subconscious mind, which really is a computer system that is so advanced. I believe that it can only be described as divine in origin. It's beyond our ability to really comprehend. We know that the subconscious mind is keeping our heart beating, right? Keeping air moving in and out of our lungs, and creating millions of new cells every minute and trillions of chemical reactions every minute. We know that it does those things, but we really don't know how it does those things. We don't know what consciousness is. We don't really understand any of these things. And so what happens to us is that when we experience an emotion and it becomes trapped in our bodies, or if someone else is experiencing an intense emotion and that becomes trapped inside of us, or if we inherit an emotion, or we bring an emotion into conception with us from wherever we were before conception, then the subconscious mind knows everything there is to know about those emotions, when they were created, who was involved, what it was about, and so on. And so in the emotion code, what we do is we respect the subconscious mind, and we always ask if there is more that we need to know about a trapped emotion. What we're doing with that question is we're giving the subconscious mind a chance to bring more to conscious awareness about that emotion. And it's really funny. Sometimes the subconscious mind will just say, no, that's it. Just release it. I'm fine. Sometimes it'll say, yeah, you need to figure out when this happened. And so sometimes all we need to do is figure out the age that the emotion happened at. Sometimes we need to go a little bit deeper even. And sometimes we block things out and we forget things, right? Um, we remember very little really consciously about our lives. I mean, if you think about what kind of memories you have from when you were a child, well, you probably don't really remember a whole lot. The highlights, right? Most of it is just kind of lost. And so things happen that we forget about. In fact, sometimes even as adults, we block things out and forget about them consciously. In fact, I was working with a woman once who she was about 40 years old, and a trapped emotion of grief showed up at and I had to test to see when it had occurred. I needed more information about it, and it showed up at age 28. And she said, "Oh, that can't be right. I was fine at age 28. Everything was fine." I said, "Okay, well, let me recheck it." I rechecked it 3 times, came up with the same thing each time. And then she said, "Well, it doesn't really make any sense. I don't remember what was going on then." And then she breaks down crying. And you won't believe this, but she told me her husband had had an affair. So she had an affair to get even. Always a great idea, right? And then her life kind of spiraled out of control. And she had blocked it out to the point where when I brought up that year of her life 3 times, she still didn't remember until finally it started to surface. And it was good to get rid of that. So things happen to us that we don't even know about. In fact, one of my favorite stories is I was at an event once that I was putting on, and as people were filing in, I was meeting people, and I met this young woman and her mother that showed up. So later during the event, I'm showing people what a trapped emotion is, and I asked for a volunteer, and this young woman comes up. She's about 21 years old, and so using muscle testing, if you can imagine, I've got her holding one arm out parallel to the floor. I'm asking questions and then testing her muscle strength. And the body tends to be strong on yes answers and weak on no answers that are coming from the subconscious mind. And I found that she had a trapped emotion of forlorn. And forlorn is feeling kind of all alone and hopeless and desolate, right? And I asked, "Do we need to know more about this?" And the subconscious said, "Yes." Got a strong answer. And so I started testing. Well, did this happen earlier than 10? Yes. Earlier than 5? Yes. Earlier than birth? No. Age 1? Yes. So during the first year of her life, and I thought, well, she's not going to remember this. And I asked her, I said, "Do you have any idea what this is about?" She had no idea. And I happened to look out at the audience, and there's her mother, and she's as white as a ghost, and she's got eyes like saucers. And I said, "Hey, do you have any idea what this is about?" And she said, well, yes, that she did. She was really embarrassed, but she said she thought she knew what this was about. She said during those years, she used to use cloth diapers, and one day she accidentally pinned her daughter to her diaper and didn't know about it until she changed her the next time. And so here's this poor baby, probably for 2 or 3 hours, with this terrible pain, crying, and her mom must have been really overwhelmed. And so she was feeling this powerful emotion of forlorn, this desolation feeling, and that became trapped in her body. Well, this was the first time that this young woman had heard this story from her mother. She had no idea that had happened to her. And so I released the trapped emotion, and she went and sat down, and that was the end of it, right? About 10 days later, I get an email from this girl's mother. And she said, I have to talk to you. She said, for about 10 years, my daughter has had this kind of a low-level problem with her hip and her knee, this pain that's been slowly, gradually getting worse over years of time. And she said it's slowly been affecting the way that she walks a little bit. And we've tried taking her to different people to fix this, but nothing has ever really fixed it. And she said, but the moment you release that trapped emotion of forlorn from her, the hip pain and the knee pain have been completely absent. They haven't come back. She said, I waited 10 days because I thought maybe it was a fluke. But she said, apparently it's fixed. And she said, not only that, but she said, my daughter's feeling this new sense of lightness of being that she hasn't felt before. And she's telling everybody about this. And she said, I thought you wanted to know what the end result was of that. And, that only took a couple of minutes to do. But yet, if we hadn't released that, that girl would probably still be in pain And by the time she's middle-aged, she's probably getting a hip replacement and a knee replacement and all of that, you see, because of what had happened to her as a baby. And so that's one of the beautiful things about the emotion code, is that you're really able to bypass the conscious mind, which knows really almost nothing. And you're able to go right to the source, and that's the subconscious that knows everything. It remembers everything you've ever done, every face you've ever seen in a crowd, every split second of your life, everything you've ever eaten or tasted or touched or smelled, every emotion you've experienced, what emotions are trapped, what they're doing to you, the price you're paying. If you've got a heart wall, what the emotions are that are making that up. It's all in there, and it's so easy to ask and get the information out of it. It's a whole new ball game now.
So many things are coming up because I see a heart wall as kind of like being like a painkiller. Sorry, I refuse to say the brand name because I feel like they're sponsoring all the TV shows right now since they got bad press. And I'm not going to be one of those. I'm not getting paid. Anyways, a painkiller of some sort, where it can feel like a godsend when you're in need, but at the same time, if you're using it for knee pain and then it doesn't hurt anymore, you keep walking on it, you're just doing more damage. And so if your heart wall stays up, it's gonna come out in other ways, because I think our bodies have this beautiful system where, yes, the heart wall comes up to protect you, but symptoms pop up so you don't forget the heart wall completely and you actually address it. And so I'm wondering, though, I can see that the heart wall can clearly interrupt your ability to give and receive love, but you're saying it actually also can create pain or change organ function and even decision making in daily life.
Well, absolutely. Yeah, I've seen it many, many times. And, well, if you think about it, that advice to follow your heart is really such great advice. But what if you've got a heart wall? I mean, the best ideas that you'll ever have will not come from the brain that's in your head. They'll come from the brain that's in your heart. But if you have a heart wall, it becomes much more difficult. And I think that really, if you take a step back from this, what it's really all about is, I think it ties into our purpose here in this world, because what are we here to do? Well, at best, I think what we're here to do is we're here to learn how to love others unconditionally. And we're here to learn how to really live from our heart, right? I think the heart wall gets created because we're not there yet, right? If we were being unconditionally loving and unconditionally forgiving, I don't think we would create trapped emotions or heart walls either, right? But because we're not there, we do develop emotional baggage, and we develop heart walls and so on, and then they become a hindrance to us. But luckily now we're living in an age when we have the technology to be able to figure this out. And one of the beautiful things about this is not a high-tech kind of thing. This is something that you can learn from the book itself, right? The new book, The Heart Code, of course, is specifically about this, but we also teach it in the emotion code and the body code. We're not holding back this technology from the world, right, and putting it behind some kind of a paywall. This is information that anyone can learn and anyone can use. And so, I've thought a lot about this. There was I can't remember the name of the guy now, but there was an emergency room doctor who talked about how in the ER, when someone flatlines and their heartbeat stops, about 15% of the time they're able to resuscitate those people with the paddles, right? But 85% of the time they're gone. They don't come back. And he said one day in the ER, he had this experience where there were 3 different people that came back, which was very unusual. But what was even more unusual is what they said. All 3 of them essentially more or less said, "Why did you bring me back?" Nobody ever wants to come back when they go to the other side, right? It's just, they never want to, which I think is funny. But the other thing that they said was, that for the first time in their whole life, when they went to the other side, they felt totally accepted. And if you think about that, total acceptance is really the fruit of unconditional love. And one of the beautiful things about the emotion code, and especially that part of the emotion code that we refer to as the heart code, the part that involves removing the emotional layers that are trapped around the heart, is that it opens your ability to love others unconditionally. It increases your ability to do that. It also increases your ability to feel love for other people. And there are testimonials in the Heart Code book where you'll read that people, some of these people, for the first time in their life, knew what it was like when their heart wall was taken down to feel the emotion of joy, or to understand for the first time in their life what love actually felt like. Other people report that when the heart wall was taken down for the first time in their life, they could feel the love of the creator, the divine source for them, which I think is always here all around us, but most of the time we're kind of numb to it. And so I think those are really incredibly powerful things.
Mm. Yeah, I'm wondering, when I look at all of this information through my own experience, there's actually a few, like I have had this feeling that I have a repressed memory for a very long time. And I have worked with a bunch of different healers and different modalities, even whether it's intuitives, somatic practitioners, and I've just kind of brought it up. And it keeps coming through in many ways that I don't need to go there. So I don't have the answer. But it's interesting to me how you mentioned sometimes you'll ask the subconscious, like, what do we need to know? Or do we need to go here? And sometimes it says yes, and sometimes it says no. I'm wondering, do you have a theory on why that is? Because I am starting to develop one. I'm wondering. I'm wondering if knowing would create more pain, or unearth a can of worms where I've already done so much healing that maybe I've healed what needs to be healed. So I don't need to go back there. It's safer for me not to. But I'm just curious if you've developed a theory.
Well, that's interesting. I think that quite often, as you clear your emotional baggage, you can become more sensitive to things, I think, that are really deep inside. A lot of the time, uh, what we find is that those are inherited energies that that have come from an ancestor that experienced something intense long ago. In fact, here's an absolutely mind-blowing story for you along these lines. One of our practitioners told us that she was working on herself. She was home alone, and she found that she had an inherited trapped emotion of shame that she had gotten from her mother. Now, the subconscious knows all of this information, and so that she was muscle testing herself and getting this information. And her mother had gotten it from her mother, who got it from her mother. And I believe it was her great grandmother that she'd gotten this from. And when she arrived at that, all of a sudden, this woman appears, materializes in the room, and it was this great grandmother. And she told this woman, her great granddaughter, what had happened to her. She told her that when she was a child, she was sexually abused for many years. And those days being how they were, and the shame of it being so great, she was never able to tell anyone what had happened to her. And so she carried this shame all her life and died an old woman and took the secret with her to the grave. And then all these years later, this great granddaughter is working on her, or is working to release this emotion. And she said the two of them wept together. And so that's a pretty wild story, but I really do believe that it's true. I think that uh, these ancestors of ours are closer than we think. I believe that most of the time, I think that they are probably what you might call our guardian angels. I think that a lot of the time when we're asking for help, that those answers and those warning messages and so on, those little bits of guidance that we receive come from them. And so we can't see them most of the time, but there are people who can see them, and they're kind of few and far between. But it's really interesting. In fact, anyway, I could talk more about that, but
That has me so curious because that I, as a child, my parents had me in therapy because I was exhibiting a lot of signs of a child that might have been sexually abused. We don't know, I guess. We never found out anything. I just had to work through all of those behaviors. But it does have me curious because my grandparents, or my grandma on my dad's side, she stayed with an abusive man. She was eventually murdered. And so part of the reason why healing is so important to me is because I don't want to pass down my ancestral trauma. And I definitely feel as though I experienced it, even if I don't know what directly came from what. And so I want to be the pattern breaker in my family. And in order for me to have kids and feel really good about it, I needed to get myself to a place where I wasn't just automatically passing on things that I had inherited.
Well, absolutely. And I want to commend you, Melissa, for feeling that way, for wanting to get rid of that baggage, not only for yourself, but also for your kids, so that it's not passing down. And, really the emotion code enables you to do that, to be that pattern breaker, and to heal your own family and your own family line. It's really amazing. I have to tell you a story along these lines. I was at a conference once, and I was speaking to about 300 people, and I asked the audience. I said, if you think you're in more pain than anybody else in this room could possibly be, stand up. And so this lady hobbles up to the stage. She's had pain in her hip for an entire year, and she's seen different doctors, and nobody can figure out what it is. And so I tested her. I found one thing. The pain went from a 9 to a 4 on the 0 to 10 scale. And the next thing that I found was that she had an inherited trapped emotion of, I believe it was fear, and it went back 11 generations in her father's line. Now, one of the things that I do, and this will sound funny, but I'm telling you, it's really kind of fun. The subconscious mind always knows and is aware of things that we're not consciously aware of. So I always like to ask at that point, and like I did with her, I had her hold out her arm, and I said, "Okay, are these ancestors here with us?" And the answer is always yes. And then I asked her, "Well, are they sitting out there in the audience?" No. Are they floating around in the air, here? No. Are they up here on the stage with us? And that answer is always yes. And they're there, I think, for two reasons. They're there because they are also carrying this emotional energy, okay? And they're also there because I'm working on a descendant of theirs, and they love that descendant, and that's part of their family, right? So they're there for those reasons. And so when I released that inherited trapped emotion of fear from her, the pain was gone. She starts dancing, literally dancing around on the stage. And I actually ran into her a year later, and the pain still did not come back. But the interesting thing was, I wrapped up that lecture, went back to our booth there at this event. And right after I got there, this woman comes up to the booth, and she said, "Dr. Nelson," she said, "I'm one of those people that can see spirits." She said, "I've always had this. It's kind of been a blessing, and it's kind of been a curse." But she said, "I just wanted you to know that I could see those grandfathers up there, just like you talked about. But she said there was something else going on that I don't know that you're aware of." She said, "What I saw were at least 200 spirits of that woman's yet to be born descendants surrounding the stage." And she said they were there rejoicing that they were not going to have to take on her crippling emotional baggage. when they were born later, which I thought was really interesting.
Ooh, that almost made me cry. There's some truth in that for me, I feel.
For sure. Yeah, it's a true story.
So we know like brains sync up with music, and I've heard that hearts sync up as well. How does the heart wall get in the way or allow for this? What have you learned? Can a heart still sync up to another person even if it has a wall?
Well, yes, it can. But I'll tell you, we had just had a meeting last week with some folks from Heart Math, and the Heart Math Solution. Of course, they're the ones that have pioneered all this work about heart rate variability and heart coherence and so on, and um, how um, how when you're feeling positive emotions like love and appreciation and gratitude, it becomes much easier to actually live from your heart and to follow the messages that your heart is sending and so on. And we are we're talking about doing some research this coming year into this very thing, because what we believe and what we theorize is that when the heart wall is taken down, we think it's going to be much easier for people to reach a state of coherence much faster. But it's going to be a clinical thing that we're going to have to do, and we have not done it yet. But we believe that that's going to be part of it, absolutely.
Well, for listeners, I love leaving them with something to do or think about this week. And for this topic, are there any practices that help you to keep your heart open after you've gone through the heart clearing process in your book?
Well, yes, again, if you think about it, uh, it's it's really about unconditional love. I think those that learn to love unconditionally in this life win the game. Life is a game. And if you think about, for example, what the Apostle Paul talked about, he said, if I have all knowledge and I don't have the ability to love unconditionally, I'm nothing. He said, if I have enough faith that I can move mountains and I can do all kinds of amazing miracles, if I don't have the ability to love others unconditionally, then it's all in vain. And I think that it's tied in also with forgiveness, right? That when we withhold forgiveness from someone, that's the the rational part of us trying to get even with someone that's hurt us, right? But as Lewis Smedes said, forgiveness is like setting the prisoner free, only to discover that the prisoner was you, right? And sometimes we withhold forgiveness from ourselves, and sometimes it's the hardest person of all to forgive, because we were there and we made the stupid mistakes. We made the bad choices and we knew better. And so you have to forgive yourself as well. And once you begin this process of finding forgiveness, forgiving everyone that's ever hurt you in any way, and forgiving yourself as well, and asking for forgiveness from those that you have hurt, uh, as you go through that process, you begin to find more and more peace. And it's tied in with the heart wall, because remember, the more emotional baggage you remove, and the more you remove that baggage, especially from around your heart, the more you unlock your heart's ability to be able to give and receive love. And forgiveness really is the fruit of love, the fruit of unconditional love. The more you love, the more you can forgive. And so I think that I think that's something that you want to think about. I think that's the takeaway. Are there people in your life that you're still holding on to things about? Because it's not hurting them; it's only hurting you, right? It's only blocking your progression. It's damning, in a sense, your ability to progress, in the sense that if you put a dam on a river, right, or a stream, it stops that progress. That's what lack of forgiveness does to you. It stops your ability to keep moving and progressing and growing, right? It's just not a healthy thing to do at all. So So yeah, that's I think what I would want to leave everybody with. Aside from some information about where they can actually pre-order the book and get the free digital book right away.
Yes, your team said they can use code MINDLOVE. Where do they go to receive the book and the complimentary ebook?
Yeah, if they go to my personal site at drbradleynelson.com, that's drbradleynelson.com, they can get the free digital ebook right away. They can do all their Christmas shopping in one shot because you can get as many books as you want. The Heart Code book comes out December 2nd. And yeah, everybody that you know needs one. And so it can be the easiest Christmas shopping you've ever done.